All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 18, 2023 meeting of the Form-Based Code Area Working Group. We are holding a virtual public meeting tonight, and all participants are joining remotely. I'd like to orient everyone to the virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Tonight's meeting is available to join from the Form-Based Code Area Working Group webpage, the county's events calendar, and at the top of this evening's agenda. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. If anybody loses internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. And please keep your video turned off and microphone muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. These tools are located as icons on your command bar. And if you do not see this command, the toolbar called the command bar, try tapping or clicking at the center of your screen and it should pop up. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that's located on the command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. And if you are dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute. When you are finished speaking, please re-mute your microphone. The meeting chat is active for participants who need technical assistance only, and it should not be used for discussion, for public comment, for questions about agenda items, or for requests for more information. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony periods. And some additional notes for area working group members. Those who wish to be recognized to speak on an issue or an item, please turn on your video feed and leave your microphone muted. I will use video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. Once you have completed speaking, please turn your video feed back off. And just to check, I don't think we have any commissioners who are joined via phone. Does anyone see anything differently?
I don't see anything differently. We'll just have to keep in mind that Linda won't be able to turn her video on.
Right, good point. And you'll be called upon, so for public speakers, you'll be called upon to speak at the end of the meeting tonight, and you'll be muted when your time is concluded. For area working group members, I am going to send, I realize that not everyone might have my cell phone number, so I am going to send it around with the, I guess this might be more for Linda than anyone, but if I have failed to notice that you have spoken up, I invite you to just send me a text just for that purpose, to let me know that I might have missed you coming on camera. Lastly, this is a public forum, and tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. So that being said, Olivia, Ms. Sante, would you give us the first agenda item?
Yes, so the first agenda item this evening is going to be a neighborhoods form-based code amendment for elder care uses, and then we will move on to the review of the Arlington View Terrace neighborhoods form-based code proposal, and then on to just some light development proposal updates. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll get started. All right, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
I'm going to assume yes. All right, thanks, Mark. So again, this is a neighborhoods form-based code amendment with the primary objective of addressing the current challenges of meeting the affordability requirements for elder care uses in the neighborhoods form-based code by allowing a cash contribution to meet those requirements. So we'll start with a little bit of background. The zoning ordinance didn't always have elder care uses explicitly listed. So back in November of 2019, the county board approved some zoning ordinance amendments, which unfortunately inadvertently excluded elder care uses from being introduced into Appendix A and B, the neighborhoods and the commercial and neighborhoods form-based codes. So as of this year, September of 2023, the county board approved approved amendments to, among other items, introduce those elder care uses into Appendix A and B. So we do now have, you can see over here on the table, under the residential use category, under household living, we have independent living facilities listed. And then under group living, we have assisted living facilities, continuing care, retirement communities, and nursing homes. So another quick thing to note, as you all know, we don't currently have affordability requirements in the commercial form-based code, but we do have those requirements in the neighborhoods form-based code. So for residential development, on-site units are required, and then for commercial development, cash contribution is required. So just a reminder of the distinction between those two areas. This specific amendment will focus on the neighborhoods area, as that is the code that currently has those affordability requirements. So again, kind of the purpose of this amendment is that currently with those elder care uses housed under the residential use category, they have to provide those on-site CAFs. We continue to hear about the challenges, you know, and the realities of actually providing on-site CAFs in some of these facilities, especially when multiple uses are kind of combined within one facility. We know that it's, you know, complex financing involved. So what we're hearing is that a cash contribution option is necessary to kind of allow for elder care development, especially along Columbia Pike. So we're looking at, there's a number of different changes that need to occur just to facilitate this allowance. One of those is to create a new elder care use category, both in the neighborhoods form-based code, but also in the overall zoning ordinance, which would include those 4 uses: independent living, assisted, continuing care, and nursing home uses. We also don't currently have specific parking requirements for elder care uses in the neighborhoods form-based code, which is another, you know, challenge and barrier to actually realizing some of those uses on the Pike. So we would be looking to apply the existing parking requirements that are in the zoning ordinance to the neighborhoods form-based code. And we'll look at what those parking requirements are in just a minute. Then the main event is revising the affordability requirements in Section 9 to allow cash contributions to apply to the elder care use category that's been created. And then some additional kind of more technical cleanup is just amending the zoning ordinance Article 12 to add specific elder care use standards, which would then eliminate the existing elder care definition. So we'll go over the timeline in a little more detail at the end of the presentation, but just so that you all can keep this in mind, we are looking at a request to advertise going to the county board in November of this year, and then the amendments going to the county board in December. So this is just a snapshot of some of the analysis that we've done so far. We felt that it was different to differentiate elder care as a separate use category from strictly residential uses, just because of the kind of complex needs of those facilities and some of the financing. And then having this kind of separate use category and specific use standards also allows for a more tailored approach as we explore, you know, things like affordability and the parking standards. The other item was whether or not independent living should be included in this new elder care use category. And I think what we found is that, you know, independent living is not just age restricted apartments. It also includes other kind of facilities that are within the larger building, including dining, housekeeping, and those other amenities that would support the residents. It's also often co-located with assisted living facilities. So it's important to have those amenities available to both groups and housed under a category that addresses the uses as a whole. And then the third item was that a cash contribution option was not only necessary, but it also was appropriate in order to kind of break through some of these barriers and these challenges that providers are facing when trying to propose elder care development, specifically on Columbia Pike. So the next couple slides will just specifically take a look at some of these changes that are occurring that have already been described. So again, just in summary, we'd be looking at this new elder care use category, which would include all 4 of those uses. We can see that new category kind of highlighted in yellow here, which would be separate from the residential category. And then here are those parking standards I talked about earlier. So this is the exact same requirement that's currently in our zoning ordinance with 0.5 spaces per bedroom for independent living, assisted living, and continuing care, and then 0.5 spaces per bed for nursing homes. And then in the same way, we are looking at bike parking requirements that are appropriate for elder care facilities. So those would be 1 employee space per 10 bedrooms and 1 visitor space per 50 bedrooms. So here's the addition to the cash contribution section in Part 9. So we'd be looking to explicitly list elder care use categories. You'll also see here that we want to list civic uses, just to make it clear that those also have the cash contribution option available to meet their affordable housing requirements. And then here is the language that would be inserted into Article 12 of the zoning ordinance. It essentially takes the existing definition that's in Article 18 of the zoning ordinance and creates a set of use standards, including characteristics, examples, the accessory uses, and then which uses are not included. And then similarly, this is just technical cleanup, but we would be adding that elder care use category, which you can see here at the bottom. We'd be adding that into the public districts, residential, multifamily, and commercial mixed use districts use tables. So we met with the zoning committee of the Planning Commission back on October 10th to get some feedback. We met with the Commission on Aging earlier this week. And then next steps, we have the Planning Commission meeting scheduled on December 4th. A couple of Housing Commission meetings coming up. And then again, RTA request to advertise in November with the amendments going to the county board in December. So Matt Matuzak and I are both on and happy to answer any questions you all may have about the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Olivia. I think Michelle, I see you're on screen. So maybe if you have a question or if you're just prepared, I'll call to you first.
No, that's fine. I have a couple of questions. It sort of flashed through really quickly, but like, what was I didn't quite catch the amount of the contribution. And this is maybe me just not knowing, but where does the money go?
I will pull up the exact language in just a moment. See if we can see that. So this is our, these are the current cash contribution ratios. So we can see that, okay. And then they would go into the Affordable Housing Investment Fund.
So sorry, so it's the elder care, it would just go into the general fund. It wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed for elder care units somewhere else. It would just be general affordable housing.
That's my
Right.
understanding, yes.
I got pizza. I even got those stupid yellow tomatoes that you like.
And let me Okay, just as I start talking, there's a hand that goes up. My apologies. Can you help us just a little bit more on how the housing portion of the or at least help me a little bit more on how the housing portion, how the AHIF funds that would be used toward, if they were to be used, if AHIF funds were to be used toward elder care, how would the use of those funds be disaggregated from the services component of the cost of elder care, or would they be?
Matt, do you mind addressing this one?
Sure. It's actually something that we are, good evening, everybody. We are in the process of really establishing, because absent of Sunrise's application on Glebe Road that was approved by the board on Saturday, there really isn't any instances where the county collected such funding, as I understand, and actually had to apply it. I think what ends up happening is we go through a pretty rigorous recording process, even just putting elder care uses aside. When it comes just to affordable housing, there have been instances where AHIF money was collected from development applications for a specific purpose, such as a site located in the same area. So that level of documentation does exist, and I think is being tracked by not just the housing division in our department, but also the manager's office. But the specifics of how that would happen for elder care developments, I think, is still under review.
Thanks. That certainly makes sense. But I'm glad to hear that it is being worked on. I'm Mark Cole.
All right. So, and Matt, maybe you just answered this, but I'm kind of a netted out guy. Is it unfair or wrong for me to say that by only having the cash option for these elder care developers, Arlington County is not going to have appreciable, affordable elder care options for people? If I need assisted living, I need independent living or whatever, it sounds like those developments that go in are going to be contributing. We know there's a dearth of them currently. I understand that. They're going to be just doing cash contributions to the fund, and those facilities, those properties that are built under this code are not, they will not have any affordable housing or affordable units specifically.
I think the short answer to what I think you're asking is that, yes, the initial projects we anticipate to receive will not have any on-site affordability. The reason that's the case, and you're starting to peel back some harsh realities of our region, but also realities of our zoning ordinance, in that the amendment Olivia just described follows work that initially began in 2019 throughout the entire county, where I believe in 2 instances, September and December of that year, county staff worked to adopt a really broad spectrum of amendments to the broader zoning ordinance, impacting multiple zoning districts, because even at that point in 2019, just a handful of years ago, we had a significant level of barriers that just prevented that use from even being introduced into the county. And I think in recognizing that we need the use, right, just kind of our initial step, is it appropriate? Where is it appropriate? We are still in the process, even tonight, of correcting some of those barriers that prevent us from really achieving those uses throughout the county, in this case, Columbia Pike. The subsequent level or next phase of such an effort would get into something like the affordability piece, because that is a much bigger bite to really, address in these situations, because it does involve not just, the affordable housing provisions here, but really our other ordinances and even language that Richmond, I think, applies to this region in our county. And I think for us to really be meaningful in addressing on-site affordability, it's going to expand beyond the code, beyond the zoning ordinance, and beyond the county. It's going to require some action from Richmond.
Okay, heard and understood. I just hope that we can do something, because it's just, you know, I don't think I want to live in a community that you know, doesn't have room for. I mean, I'm reaching that now, so but hopefully I'm not going to have the affordability piece. But I want people who need help affording it to be able to live in our community too. So okay, thank you.
Yeah, and again, we're probably going to come back to this several times throughout this process, but you know, we're not really happy with that outcome either, and I think we're fully recognizing that more work is left, work that really needs to be addressed throughout the county, not just Columbia Pike, because it's a problem that is nowhere near being solved. But in the meantime, as those larger efforts continue to go on behind the scenes, this is one of the, you know, few things we can do it now to at least allow such uses to move forward while we keep working on the bigger question.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry, my
Oh,
wand was up. Let me go to Catherine.
Great, thank you. Hi, this is Kathy Guernsey from Columbia Forest. Yeah, let me lower my hand while I think of it. There we go. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around a little bit the before scenario and what we anticipate to be the after scenario if this is adopted, and just making sure that I'm clear and can explain to people in my neighborhood what the difference is. So, and that gets to sort of the rationale for why you're doing this. But I wondered if you could just take me back a little bit and reorient me as to the rationale for this change. Thank you.
So I think part of what we're hearing right now from developers and providers interested in providing elder care facilities, and again, specifically on Columbia Pike, is that meeting the existing requirements right now for the number of on-site affordable housing units is just completely unattainable. I think kind of as an example, maybe in other counties, and we're still not seeing success in other counties, we might see somewhere on the order of 2% of those units as designated on-site units. And again, we're not seeing a lot of projects even come through and able to meet those requirements. And right now, our on-site affordable requirements are much, much higher than that for, you know, normal multifamily buildings. So again, I think this body of work that we anticipate to, you know, occur in the near future requires just a lot more assessment of the costs of providing, like the cost of providing even just one on-site affordable housing unit based on the cost of those services that have to be subsidized by the provider. So it's a much bigger conversation that we know we can't address with this amendment, but what we know we can do is at least extend the pathway and allow for a cash contribution option for elder care, so that we're not barring elder care projects from moving forward when there is interest in providing some of those projects. But again, kind of just expanding those options so at least there is a viable path forward. I think, you know, we saw on the recent Sunrise project right now, projects elsewhere in the county, elder care projects elsewhere in the county, do have the option of providing a cash contribution or on-site units. And although we'd love to see on-site units, it continues to just be a challenge to actually deliver those, just given the financial realities of actually providing one of those units.
This is Kathy. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate that this is being done to get rid of some of the friction associated with creating these sorts of facilities. But to Mark's point about wanting to ensure that we don't stop here, that we can still move beyond this to get those on-site affordable units, recognizing that that may be a Richmond a Richmond question as well. But okay, thank you. That was a helpful reframing for me, just to make sure that I can explain this to my colleagues. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Michelle, and after that, I might have a couple of clarifying questions again myself after that.
Sorry, and maybe this is me just not fully understanding. So this amendment is for elder care specifically. I think what I'm personally missing, I think, is that, so do we have a requirement to provide not just affordable housing, but specifically elder care housing? But when we did those amendments back in 2019, we inadvertently left out elder care as one of the exceptions. I think that's what I'm missing, is I don't fully know how to explain it yet, because it's like people are required to provide elder care, but they can't, and so they want to do cash contributions, or it's, I think I'm getting a little, I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little confused between just affordability and CAFs versus specifically the elder care units. Is that right? Like, if you could just, I'm sorry, if you could just spend a second on that. I don't know quite how to explain it to everyone.
Sure. So the 2019 amendments, they added those elder care uses to our use tables so that they now were allowed as uses. And in 2019, that's when they forgot to add them to the neighborhoods and commercial form-based code. So even if someone wanted to propose an elder care project, they could not have done so at the time. So now they are an allowed use in the neighborhoods and commercial form-based code. And if someone were to come in with an elder care project, or any project, any kind of development project, we do have an affordable housing requirement. Now, depending on whether you're residential or commercial, you have access to either providing just a cash contribution option or the on-site unit option. So that's where we distinguish the two. So we assume that if you're coming in with an elder care project where it's elder care units, some of those units would be affordable, or a portion of those units would in this case, it would be the GFA would have a cash contribution requirement.
I see. Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
So to the extent that I apologize to the extent that this question is a repackaging of of the one, Matt, that you asked a moment ago, but what is a CAF in an elder care context? What we all know what a CAF is for an apartment, right? There's some form of, you pay the person who's living in a CAF pays a certain amount that's below market rate. That apartment is committed for that purpose, and then another source of funds makes up the delta, right? Makes up between the market rate and not. And that's in an economic perspective, maybe not an accounting perspective, right? But there, the bundle of sticks is a place to live, right? But elder care, there are more sticks in the bundle. There's a place to live, but there's also supportive services, and it may be a spectrum of supportive services ranging all the way up to memory care and end-of-life care. So I don't really know what a CAF is in an elder care context. I just don't know it. And I have a follow-up question, which is, do we have any elder care CAFs in the county? And or do any of our peer jurisdictions have any elder care CAFs or committed affordable elder care units, right? Because I want to make sure that we're talking, that we I want to make sure that we're very clear about the bundle of sticks that we're talking about when we are talking about what kinds of things we do to try to incentivize the provision of more elder care in the county. And I could probably ramble more, so I'm going to stop.
No, I mean, this is great because I think we're heading down the same journey that I think county staff is in terms of not just discovering and learning more about the region's challenge with respect to elder care, but also the specifics of how do we even try to go down a path of success to make something affordable. I don't think there is a definition for a elder care committed affordable unit, because as Olivia mentioned, anything in one of those four uses, right? Assisted living, memory care, independent living, they all have some type of a blended combination of living quarters, but also a lot of services that are provided on site. And with many of these, projects, the way that they operate is that they have a blended fee that you have to pay a month. That covers all of that, the housing and the services. And what ends up happening is, because that's blended, the solution that you see on the screen now that we've been applying to the more stereotypical projects to date won't work. That's just a fact. And the closest that we have seen somebody come to addressing this is, if you look at the city of Alexandria, they have a couple of projects where they simply identified a separate path that reduces that monthly fee for the residents by a specific number that applies to a specific percentage of residents for a specific amount of time. Now, that path may ultimately become our path, but not until we have assistance and support from Richmond, which is the short story of why it's not being shown tonight. What that is exactly, I think we have not identified, and I think Alexandra's example may not be the same one that works for Arlington County, but there is that specific barrier of why we can't go as far as to suggest something like that. But as Olivia mentioned, the two options that Richmond does allow us to utilize are basically the on-site units with a very high percentage of what you're proposing that has to be affordable, that we know is nowhere near what is feasible for these projects, or you have the cash contribution. So the restricted question that we unfortunately have to face today, right, or in the upcoming weeks, is, do you want to have elder care projects? Then one of these options is going to be the path forward. And we're picking cash contribution for now, right? Very importantly, because we know that's the only way for them to actually have a path forward. In some ways, and this is maybe my own justification for how limiting this amendment is that we're essentially creating a temporary incentive for elder care projects to consider using the form-based code to locate in Arlington County until the affordability requirements are updated and become more stringent to the degree that we think we can. And at that point, I think we're going to be much closer to our goal of getting some level of on-site affordability. I don't think it'll be a committed CAF like we typically have with multifamily projects, but it's likely going to be some type of a more cohesive and comprehensive reduction in fees that residents have to pay when they are in these programs and projects.
And that is what we would mean by an on-site unit, right? However we end up constructing it, the analog to our on-site committed affordable unit is what you just described, as opposed to a cash contribution, which would likely go to something like AHIF and be likely be tagged for some kind of elder care use that is part of the broader set of projects that AHIF uses to finance, potentially.
Which is less predictable and, of course, more difficult to track, because when you with the cash contribution, like is the case with other housing projects, you have to wait until enough projects have contributed to that to then have a meaningful impact and investment into a single site somewhere in the county, at which point we're being opportunistic of where that is and can't guarantee it's going to stay in the same corridor. as much as we would like to, and then hopefully find a willing partner to kind of work with us and make that project feasible.
And if you can't find those, then the money sits there and languishes until
it gets more complicated, and year to year, I think county board has to evaluate priorities, and yeah, it's again more difficult to track. So yeah, it's
to be clear, we're talking about an entirely new category here, right? We're talking about enabling something that we don't yet have. We have on-site committed affordable housing units, but we might have market rate affordable, however you would define that, elder care within the county, but this thing called an on-site committed affordable unit for an elder care purpose, that's not something that we don't have anything in that bucket yet, right?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find anything like that in the research that either we uncovered or partners in the housing division have provided, is that anytime you will find some level of on-site affordability, it is typically in the form of a reduction in fees that is provided to qualified residents, which that alone could be a separate meeting of how you qualify folks that, let's face it, at that point are not likely generating income. So it's a very different verification process, but doing that for a certain amount of time to make sure that the value of that subsidy is on par with what we typically would like to collect in exchange for the density offered in the code.
Right, because they might be on a fixed income, but they might also have an incredible amount of assets that, and so income isn't really the appropriate tool. But I think to get to Mark's concern, and I see, Michelle, if you've got your camera back on, and then I'll go to you. But I think to get to Mark's concern, I mean, I think that the fundamental question is what, in order to be the county that provides that kind of that ensures that there is an avenue for committed affordable elder care services, right? That we also have to have a discussion about what a committed affordable elder care unit looks like, given the differences between elder care as an industry and housing as an industry, and the level of the appurtenant services and how things are paid for and financed, and what it is that you're paying for when you pay for elder care services and all of those things. I don't know, Mark. I've said I was going to go to Michelle next.
Well, I do want to just piggyback
weigh in on that too, but I'm just saying that, Matt, I want you to piggyback, but Mark, I'm trying to let you know that I also invite I welcome any thoughts that you have on what I just said, since I called you out. But Matt, and then Michelle, and then whoever's next.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a great time for this conversation, because if I'm not mistaken, earlier this month, this and many other groups were asked to provide feedback on legislative priorities, right? That would go to Richmond. This is one example. If we feel like, this is a priority and we need to have some commitments that, we can consider potential paths that do work for Arlington, but, we have Richmond somewhat in the way of us really exploring all options, then that's a signal we need to send. But to your point, Daniel, the immediate comparison just between the stark difference of a multifamily rental unit to a elder care service that includes housing, right? That broader spectrum of services. You look at rents, even at the Westmont Shopping Center project that just went in. I think one bedrooms were somewhere in the $2,300-$2,400 range. Two bedrooms were like in the $3,500 range per month, right? The costs per month for what we're hearing in these elder care projects could range anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 per month per person.
Good God.
So now we're talking about 2, maybe 3 times as much of a difference in price. So now affecting that or reducing it by 60% AMI, whatever that means for the level of subsidy for 30 years is why I think the applicants are saying, I can only give you 2% at best. And even that's, I can't really commit to just yet because of how much bigger of a subsidy it is. And I think part of the solution may have to be further exploring additional, funding mechanisms beyond the county to the degree that they're even available. But that also comes back to the underlying premise that the exchange for the density the form-based code offers is the developer pays for these affordable units. And, to what degree are we willing to revisit that in the name of elder care projects?
Thank you. Michelle, if you still want to weigh in.
I just have I'm happy for Mark to weigh in if he needs to. I just have actually kind of a small question related to the Sunrise. I didn't follow the Sunrise project very closely. And so the Sunrise project I know is market rate senior housing or whatever. Did that have affordable? So it did not have any affordable units as part of that project, or it did? It's really just kind of a small question. I just didn't follow it.
And although it's close to Columbia Pike, it's not within like the form-based code boundaries. So as a site plan, it had the option to provide either cash or on-site. So they elected for cash because they couldn't provide on-site. And even though that was, of course, a question that staff asks, a question from, commissions, they couldn't find a way to deliver on-site.
Okay, thank you. That was all I had, Daniel. Thanks.
And their on-site option, I think, would have been rounded up to 1 unit, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That's a lot of overhead that's going to get that is not going to get committed to providing for the services needed in that 1 unit, which means that 1 unit is going to sit empty for all time.
Right, and it's not targeting, the people that we wanted to target either by, at a 60% AMI of that price point. It's not reaching the people we wanted to reach.
Mark, because I mentioned you by name, I specifically want to welcome you to respond. But after that, if anyone else has any questions, I think we're at the point where I don't see any more hands going up.
Yeah, Daniel. No, I appreciate that. I'm square with what you had said. I'm on the same. I agree with it. And just because I had to satisfy my curiosity in case anybody cares, and it's my research, me and Google for about 10 minutes during this call. I did go out and look at a lot of the senior living development companies. They're all leveraged within an inch of their lives, and their profit margins are negative, if even that, if you look at their balance sheet. So anyhow, so I guess I typically don't believe anything a developer says, but perhaps there's some truth to that. But I do, if you'll indulge me, I do have one mundane question. Maybe this is what we need at this point. But when in your slides where you talked about parking and you talked about a half a parking space per 10 bedrooms or something like that, that was all well and good, but that didn't have any. There was nothing there for visitor parking. Like over on the bike section, it says we got this for visitor bikes, but in terms of like visitor parking, there was no call out for that. It was just the number of parking spaces per bedroom and bed in a nursing home. Is that normal that we wouldn't do that? Because I'm concerned. I live in the neighborhood where Sunrise is going in, and I know the Sunrise over in North Arlington is a problem in that neighborhood with, because believe it, old people some have cars and some have people that come and visit them, and there isn't enough parking around that facility for that, so people park out in the community. But So anyhow, I'll shut up. I think you understand my question.
No, it's a good observation. Thank you. And I think, some parking requirements don't distinguish necessarily between the users of those spaces. So whether they're, specifically aimed for residents or in this case, employees or visitors, I guess the provider would get to choose based on the kind of the distribution of those different uses, how those parking space would be allotted. But it's definitely a good point, something for us to think about when we're looking at these parking ratios.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, I am going to invite Ms. Sondag to bring us to the next item.
Thank
Transitions.
you. All right, it looks like Lauren is here. So this is the Arlington View Terrace West, the Phase 2 project. And Lauren is going to start first with the applicant presentation, and then we'll follow up with a little bit of a form-based code analysis. Hopefully you all were able to see the presentations ahead of time, as well as the checklist, and we'll be happy to answer questions at the end.
All right. Thanks, Olivia. As Olivia mentioned, I'm Lauren Riley. I'm with Walsh Colucci. We represent the applicant for this project, AWG Inc. And we're excited to bring before you tonight the Arlington View Terrace West project. It's one of those rare unicorn by right form-based code projects, which means there's no use permit, no public hearings. This project conforms to all of the requirements of the form-based code. And if the name is sounding a little familiar to you, you may recall the Arlington View Terrace East project that got approved just a couple of years ago, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And just to introduce the rest of the team, we have Josh Childs from AWG Inc. here tonight, Phoebe Larson with Cunningham Quill, who will be presenting on all the architecture. We also have Chuck McNamara with Camping Ruby, our landscape designer, as well as Travis Brown with Walter L. Phillips. We have a few other members from our architecture team and civil engineering team as well. We're all available to answer questions after the presentation, but I'll now hand it to Josh with AWG to introduce himself and a little bit about this project. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Phoebe, do you have share powers to put our slides up?
Yes, I'll share my screen now.
Okay. Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Josh Childs with AWG. I've got Alan Goldstein and Tom Wallinga and a whole host of the rest of our design and development team here with us tonight as Phoebe gets this together. Once you've got it, Phoebe, you can go ahead to the second. No, you're good. Yeah, thanks for everyone's time, and we're excited to be here for a really stellar phase 2, as Lauren mentioned, to continue our work in the Arlington View neighborhood. You can go ahead and go to the second slide. I will just spend a moment on AWG's new logo and name. Many of you are familiar with our organization. AWG for a while did not stand for anything, but now we are Affordable Homes and Communities. So you'll see these colors and letters from here on out for us. We are the same nonprofit, mission-driven affordable housing developer that we have been for nearly the last 50 years. Our home is in Arlington, and our sort of greatest footprint is in Arlington, but we also serve the broader Mid-Atlantic region. We also have a Baltimore office. We're a service-enriched housing provider and a deep commitment to resident services. And if Phoebe wants to go to the next slide. Our commitment to resident services, I'll just note briefly, we have at this site an enhancement since we've completed our first phase at the east site there on the left of the screen. We have a beautiful, lovely community room and resident services office that really serves our entire resident community that exists there. The folks from the older buildings that we will transform into West, and the folks who are living in this new building that we just completed this spring are all served by a full-time resident services manager. So we're excited to sort of continue enhancing the wraparound support that we're providing to our folks in this community. The zoning application you all have before you tonight is the continuation of our work that started a few years back. So Arlington View Terrace East was approved in 2020. We started our construction in 21, and we just wrapped up this spring and have all of our residents in place as of the end of this month. This site's at the corner of the Arlington View neighborhood and Army Navy Country Club. And we're really proud to have delivered those 77 units, but we know our work isn't done yet. We're really focused on bringing the same high quality, modern, efficient apartment community to the remaining portion of our residents that have been here with us for a while. Throughout the design process, we've spoken with and engaged with our residents to collect feedback on the designs we've had, and we've had a few consistent points that Phoebe will be able to highlight as she shows you the really exciting portion of the presentation. Our residents, many of them have aged in place in this community since AHC bought it as one of the first properties in our portfolio. They're located here with housing vouchers through HUD, which are project-based vouchers. So we really have long tenureship with many of our residents, and these folks are, as they're aging, the older walk-up apartment buildings that currently exist don't serve them as well as they used to. So we heard a big need and desire for the same kind of accessibility, elevators, ramps, and all that we've got at our brand new building just across the street. There was a desire for more active green space for leisure recreation. I won't spoil it for Phoebe, but to take advantage of some views for our golf course views, which are pretty spectacular for any property, let alone one in our portfolio. And I think as we were designing sort of in the mid-thick of the COVID pandemic, it really emphasized the need for more green space and more room for active recreation and fresh air that we're excited to deliver. And we heard this strong desire to keep a playground on site. It's been important not just for our residents and their kids as they've grown up, but also we heard this when we talked with folks from the Civic Association too, that a lot of people use the little playground that's currently on site. And so we were careful to make sure we had a spot to relocate it on the new site. With that brief intro, I'll turn it over to Phoebe now, who can go through our design that we're just couldn't be more proud of and really excited to have before you tonight. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Josh. That was a great introduction, background to the whole project, and I'm excited to be here today. This is the second phase of the overall development of the Arlington View Terrace project. The first one, as Josh mentioned before I click to the next slide, is on the upper left, and it just got completed this year. So we're really excited to be in the early design for the next phase across the street. So I'll just quickly flip through some of these renderings, but we wanted to kick it off showing you some of our idealized views of what we think it will look like. As you're at the top of the hill and you're looking down South Rolfe Street, you'll see our massing steps down. And in this view, you can see all the proposed development. As you come down the hill, you'll see we transition into a lighter area. And then when you get to the corner on the left off the page is where the Arlington View Terrace East project is, and this is across the street. This is the small building. We are proposing 2 buildings. And as you look right, you can see we're providing the 14th Road South extension. So the context of the project, again, is, and let me zoom in a little bit here. You can see in the bottom right corner where the Arlington View Terrace East was under construction when this aerial photo was taken. So that's where that project is. And the red outline area is the total boundary of what we're proposing for this project for the west development. And you can see it includes 4 smaller garden style apartment buildings and 1 larger one with a whole bunch of surface parking. And the views that kind of go along with that are, if you're at the top of the hill and you're looking down, that's this view. And you can see on the left, before we go on, there's a pretty steep hillside and a whole bunch of planting on the left, buffering this side of the street. As you keep going down the hill and you get to about the corner and you look in the top right image, you can see our Arlington View Terrace East project that's already constructed. This is a recent photograph. And then as you can see, the view of the Army Navy Country Club beyond is pretty nice. And then again, to kind of reemphasize that this site has these unique opportunities of just the access to these views. As you come down and you look through the buildings, you can see the grade drops off a little bit, and you can see that those amazing views in between the existing buildings. And then in the bottom right image, Josh mentioned that there is an existing playground and a driveway there, and this is where the 14th Road South extension will occur. So then when you get into the zoning and how we are complying, because we are going for, we are seeking by right form-based code approval. And that's also the approach we took on the East project. So we're pretty familiar with the requirements, and we've met with staff to make sure that we're providing what we need to do. Just to kind of quickly highlight some of the ways that we're complying in this project. One thing, so you're not confused, is in this aerial, north is up. So it's a long, skinny, vertical rectangle. When you go to the next page, just because it fits better on the page, north is to the left. So this is the uphill on South Rolfe Street, and this is the downhill with the view to the Army Navy Country Club. So as you're on the uphill side, on this property line, we do have some neighborhood manners. There's a 20-foot no build zone and another 20-foot site limit, or excuse me, height limit setback. We're not building anything in that zone at all. So we're completely waiting the full 40 feet before we start our building. And as you kind of extend down South Rolfe Street, there's a fat dash line in our drawing. On the uphill side, we have a small apartment zone, and it has, you all know, it has its own discrete set of rules. And then this line here is where the urban residential cutoff line was, and we're taking the 50-foot extension so that our urban residential line is this fat dash line. And then as you come down the hill, you're clearly in the urban residential portion on the required building line on this side. And then here you can see the 14th Road South extension kind of bisects the development. So we're providing 2 buildings. The smaller building is urban residential. We're calling that EF. And that relates to the parcel labels. And then in the small apartment, that one's AB, and it's connected to CD. I think I hit most of the, I guess one thing is, you all know we need to provide open areas. We are doing that. You can see in these hatched areas behind the gray are the buildings where we are in compliance, but you'll see I'll come to the site plan soon, and we're providing much more than just that, because this project is very exciting. It does have this unique opportunity of a long, we call it the backyard spaces. And I'll go to the next page. Just to kind of quickly, without getting into too much detail on the landscape design, because we have it shown rendered on the next page, just to quickly show, again, here's that AB portion that's in the small apartment, CD, and then EF, and then the street sections that go with it. AA is through 14th Road South, that's here. We're providing the streetscape that's required by the form-based code. BB, you can see the hillside that starts a step up here. And then our kind of smaller scale, small apartment is shown here. And then as you go down the hill and you're cutting this CC, you can see our ABT East completed footprint on the top right of the page, and it's matched across the street with the appropriate streetscape there. So then I'll go to the next page. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you all can see. The ABCD building is all connected on this level. But before I kind of get into the detail of the plan, I just want to highlight a couple larger points. One is our development is bisected. So we have one building that's providing 48 affordable apartment homes and one building that's providing 30. In total, we're providing 78. And that's the most that we could achieve on these two sites. We have a couple big ideas. One of the things that we were really excited about, and we feel it's been successful on the ABT East project, is the gesture that we have on the main corner. We call it the front porch. And so when we started coming up with big ideas for the architecture for the West development, we thought we wanted another gesture to the neighborhood. And so in this project, in the space in the middle of the ABCD zone, we have what we call our kind of front yard space, which is directly adjacent to our main entry. And it's like a courtyard space that can serve both as an amenity for the residents, but also it's accessible from the sidewalk. So people could potentially, wander down in this space and, be neighborly. As you all know, a lot of the design moves are made in order to work with the form-based code. So one thing that you probably remember from looking at the photographs is there's quite a large hill across this whole length of this development. So on the left side of the page, you're at the top of the hill, and then the grade drops off quite a lot. And you'll see that when we get into some of the elevation and section views later. As a result of that, we set our floor levels in order to comply with the code, at the average grade for that area, with the 3 feet above. So what that means is the ground floor that you're seeing here on ABCD has to be at this location. And it's actually convenient for us because it relates to this front yard space that we're calling. And when you come in that main entry, this is our main entry to this building, you come into this generous lobby space. And another one of our big ideas, which I wanted to share with you, is this front yard space is not just a landscape and a pedestrian connection to the street space and the sidewalk. It's also envisioned as a visual connection for people on the sidewalk looking through, for people in the front yard looking through. And this community room space is an amenity and an internal amenity for the residents that we envision has a transparency so that you can get a glimpse of the views of the pastoral views beyond. And one of the kind of happy evolution results from our discussions with staff is we're also providing this breezeway that is a physical exterior connection from that space to the rear. So not only do you get that visual connection through the building, you also get it physically through this breezeway space. So that's kind of the heart and the entry of the building. You can see in blue, these are all the dwelling units. We tried to make as best use we could of all the perimeter above grade that could be used as dwelling units. And you can see on the top left, we've taken advantage of spaces that are below grade and located, utilities, mechanical room, that kind of thing, where there really isn't daylight. And you'll see that when we get to the elevation views. ABCD is a lot more complex. When you get down the hill to EF, it's a lot more straightforward. And as Josh mentioned, we are taking advantage of some of the things that we've already provided on East, like the rental office. So the EF building is much simpler. It has a main entry on the uphill portion, with a lobby, but really it's just for resident use, this building. There isn't really a community room or anything like that. So we're trying to maximize the affordable homes that we can provide. So it's mostly dwelling units. And then I think this is the best view, but you'll see it in some of the other plans to talk about some of the landscape ideas. We've really enjoyed the design process thus far and the collaboration with our folks at Campion Ruby who have done the design for the landscape. And I'll do my best to convey some of their vision. The rear spaces along we call it the back of the building, are really intended to provide rich amenity spaces and a diverse series of amenity spaces, landscape and recreational, for the residents. And so you can kind of see that there are these zones in the plan that relate to the diversity of those spaces. And I'll just quickly summarize from left to right. There's access with some rain garden elements on the left. In this portion, there's this kind of open area they call the lawn with tree planting as a buffer. We have a terrace that is the natural end to that breezeway space, and also the access from the community room. And then as you go to the right, we have a kind of informal play space and then a more formal play space. So it's like two playground choices for the residents and the neighborhood. That is able to be accessed from the 14th Road South. And at the end of the 14th Road South, this paved space is meant to be like a lookout, but also potential hangout space. And it's open to someone can walk from this space all the way through here. And you can kind of see there are ramps to be able to get, because we wanted to provide access to all of the residents. All our project on East is 100% universal design, and we're providing full accessibility on this project as well. And then as you come down the hill for the landscape, you transition into this area kind of in this corner. You can see this dash line here, and let me go back to the slide before that. It's a little clearer there. This dash line here is the resource protection area, the RPA. That is where we have to be careful about the impervious area and the footprint of the building in order to comply with the Chesapeake Bay ordinance. And that actually naturally lent itself to a more forested, still natural landscape design on this portion of the site. And we're, as a part of that effort, preserving as many of the trees as is feasible and planting more. So there's a balance of passive spaces, appropriate streetscapes, also ecological diversity, I think, is included in the planting. You can see a repetition of the forms throughout the site. And then a lot of these moves are ways to provide amenity spaces, but also to enhance the views that are right next to us and our neighbor. And then not to be forgotten is we worked also closely with Walter Phillips in the civil design to make sure that the stormwater requirements were being met in the best way possible. And the landscape design really incorporates that in a seamless way. We have stormwater planters in select locations all along the landscape on the rear here. And then also tucked where we were able to, because it was a little harder with the RPA on the EF site. And then again, maximizing accessibility was important to us. And all the moves that have been done meet the form-based code and the Arlington landscape guidelines. So that's a lot. The ground floor has a lot going on. I'll go on to a little simpler plan. When you go down a level, as you come down the hill to 14 Road South, a good portion of the building is not above grade on this side of the site. and it starts to kind of pop out of the hill on the downhill side, kind of similar to the way we did it on AVT East. So that when you enter the garage space for the ABCD building, which is this one, you turn into 14 Road South, and then the entry is located here. And then we're providing 65 parking spaces for the entire development, and that meets the 78 unit dwelling unit provision. And we are taking the affordable housing ratio in order to accommodate the parking. And then as you come down the hill, the entry, the garage entry to EF is on the downhill side, tucked away from you, away from the main corner. And here's the entry to that space. And so we're dividing the parking between the two buildings for the entire development. And then we have bike parking located in both of the garages, and then utility spaces in the EF building. Again, it's a little hard to describe. I'll go to some of the other drawings, they'll make more sense. But this portion of the parking on the EF is really buried in grade. So then quickly, as you come up, I showed you the ground floor to help you get a sense of the main spaces, the main lobbies to those two buildings. We do have that hillside. So when you get up to the top of the hill, you have this, we are calling it the side lobby, but it's also another entrance for the resident use. And it also relates to the level 1 floor plan, which is above the ground level. And you can see it only really relates to grade on this portion of the site. And then the floor plates for both buildings are as much residential units as we can make them. And then when you go up to levels 2 and 3, they're mostly residential spaces. And then when you come to level 4, the division between the small apartment and the urban residential is kind of where I'm waving my little hand here. On the left side, we are providing dwelling units in the attic spaces. So you can see that in blue here. And that's why there's these gray, because we're cutting through the roof and you're getting a little bit of a view of the roof below. And then when you're in the urban residential zone, we only have roof access spaces, and we're excited to provide a roof deck on this project, as well as solar, which we provided on AVT East, that's intended for this project, as well as the usual mechanical equipment, but it's going to be limited because we don't have a lot of roof space. And then on EF, we have a mechanical equipment and solar zone. And you'll see the architecture in the section, the parapets are really designed to help screen that equipment. And then we've lowered the parapet where we have the screen roof, so that the screen roof actually is serving as a visual amenity for the neighborhood and our AVT East project across the street, as well as helping us achieve our stormwater goals. And then when you get to the very top of the cake, you have the roof plan of the small apartment is, gable form with these dormer along the form-based code facade side, as well as facing the Army Navy Country Club. And then the sections, I think I'll just go through these quickly, and if anybody has any questions, we can revisit them. Section 1 is through the small apartment, that's the upper left. You can see the gable roof with the dormers and the units within. Section 2 shows if you cut through that breezeway, and let me zoom in a little bit here, you can see the grade change from the sidewalk in the street down to the rear portion of the site, and we're taking up the balance with our courtyard space in this breezeway to get people access to that portion of the site. And then section 3 is through the urban residential portion, so it has that flat roof with the rooftop amenity here. And then This section is cut kind of through the ridge. So you can see from here to here is the small apartment zone. And this is the AB portion. And then we have this connector piece in the middle. And then on this side is the urban residential. And you can see it steps down because of the grade. And then the EF building is a lot simpler. Cutting this way, you see it's basically urban residential, similar to the CD portion of the ABCD building. And then it's pretty simple cut the other way. And then to take you through, I think, understanding some of those ideas that I was talking about, or some of those things I was pointing out earlier, the elevation makes the most sense, and we do have rendering, so I'll flip to those next, but the elevation kind of helps explain all of it together. Again, on the right of the page, you have this small apartment. You can see it's 3 stories with the gable roof with dormers. And we have broken up the massing into discrete vertical facades, change in material, change in the treatment around the windows. And then as you come to this middle portion, you can see in our key plan, this is set back. So it's not a form-based code regulated facade. It's not on the RBL, but it is still within the small apartment zone of along the streetscape. So to us, it made the most sense to treat it similar to the small apartment, and then really break up the connection between the two with this vertical element, which also kind of helps emphasize the breezeway beyond below. And you can see the hillside at the sidewalk level, and this dash line here, that's where the sidewalk occurs. We cut below that so you could see into our courtyard space, but the sidewalk is up here. And then as you come down the hill, you see we come into more discrete vertical, 2 discrete vertical facades. This white one is our main urban residential portion, and we're emphasizing the main entry to the building with these larger openings, an entry canopy. And then as you come down the hill, we want it to be a little bit more quiet because that's not our main entry. And then I think also this connector space, because it is directly adjacent to our, what we call the front yard, we wanted this to be a special element with this white projecting bay and these dormers, so that when you're in this space, it really feels like a rich facade. And just to highlight again, we've stepped the massing as you go down the hill. And one thing that Lee Quill, who's on the call, and Lee, feel free to jump in if you want. When we're discussing the design ideas for this project, I enjoy this analogy is the AVT East project that we completed across the street. We set up this language of architecture, and the West project is not a copy of that. The buildings are like a family where everyone looks like they're part of the family, but everyone has their unique differences. And that's guided the approach that we've taken for all of the design moves that we're providing on this development. So materials and colors run through a similar vein, but different treatments, different differences between them all so that they are different but related. So then to come back to the rendering, again, this is your uphill side. You see the shed roof with the dormers for the small apartment area. And then the whole development stepping down. And then here again, and this is really easier to understand in 3D. Here's our main entry at that urban residential portion. Here's down in this space is our front yard. And we're providing the street wall that's required by the form-based code, but we're doing it in a way that is as low a visual barrier as we can provide. And then the landscape design has helped us kind of hint at what's contained within with these small ornamental trees, so you can get a sense of there's something worth coming up to and going inside. You can see here, there is that visual connection through that breezeway. And I think I'll go to the next one. So then the EF building that's down the hill and across 14th Road South. 14th Road South extension is on the right side of the page. We have two discrete vertical facades. Our main entry is on the uphill side. You can see here with an entry canopy to signal to people that that is the entry. And then as you come down the hill, we've tucked the parking entrances out of the way. And then again, it's much easier to understand in 3 dimensions. So if you're standing at the corner of the intersection, you're looking at that building, there it is. And you can see that it is similar but different. And then while we're on this view, I guess I just want to remind you all that this 14th Road South extension is the visual access to the pastoral views beyond. And that includes this paving space that is part of the whole string of site elements on the rear. And then that's it. And apologies, I kind of jumped into it too fast, but I just wanted to make sure that also my team members who work together, we all work together on this project, Lee Quill and Erica Aronson are also on this call. So if you all have questions, they might be able to answer them as well. And that's it.
Thanks, Phoebe. Olivia, that's the end of our applicant presentation. I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. That was a very thorough review of the project. So I'll try to keep this portion pretty quick and just focused on some of the highlights. So again, just to orient us to the subject site located.
We can't see your screen yet. I don't know if you were sharing.
Oh, thank you. Looks like it didn't quite catch.
We can see it now.
Perfect. Thanks, Lauren. All right. So we have the Arlington View Terrace site right over here in the Arlington View neighborhood. And then again, just to focus on kind of the regulating plan, we've got the existing 2 parcels right here bordering the Columbia Heights neighborhood. And then over on the other side of the page, we have our BES designations, which Phoebe covered, which include the townhouse small apartment up on the northern portion, and then the urban residential fronting a portion of this parcel here, and then the most southern parcel. And then the other kind of interesting, more unique thing to point out on this site is it also includes some of those in addition to the required building lines in red, we also see those lot building lines here fronting 14th Road South. So Phoebe went through just some of the kind of highlights of the site plan. I'll highlight a few things just from kind of the BES requirements context. Again, she highlighted this 40-foot setback that we see here for the small apartment BES, which allows that ultimate building height. This is also the portion where we see that attic story included, that 12-foot breezeway running through the building. This area, we see the streetscape improvements along the entire frontage. And then, oops, as Phoebe also highlighted, the open space requirements are being met for each of these individual BES sites. So the first one here, the second one here with urban residential, and then the third one being building E and F. So again, we can see these existing, I believe there are 37 existing units between all of these buildings on site. and then the proposed kind of replacement. So a quick highlight, as far we have the requirements over here on the left-hand side and what's being proposed on the right-hand side. The minimum requirements would usually be 20% or 6 committed affordable units, but we're saying, of course, 100%, all 78 of those calves at 60% AMI for 30 years per the requirements of those terms under the form-based code. We also have requirements for a minimum of 3 2-bedroom units and at least 1 3-bedroom unit. And again, those requirements are being exceeded. We also have a proposal for Earthcraft Gold for this project for their green building standards. And then again, here you can see the 3 different BES sites, what those requirements are, because in this case, the requirements are different for small apartment versus urban residential. So you can see the square footage requirements here too, as compared to what's being provided. So again, well exceeding those minimum requirements. And then they are meeting the parking ratio, which in this case is allowed that affordable housing parking reduction to 0.825, which is a 0.7 per unit for residents, and then a 0.125 per unit for visitors. So we have a total of 65 spaces provided between the 2 garages. 60 of those are standard spaces and 5 are ADA. And then again, exceeding the bike parking requirements with 1 per 2.5 units for residents, so requiring a total of 32, and then 1 per 50 units for visitors. So we see 36 of those spaces provided in the parking garage, and then 8 of those spaces for visitors provided on street. And I believe those 8 spaces are distributed, some in along the frontage of buildings A, B, C, D, and then some others provided in front of E and F. So just to go over the process for this one, the preliminary review started probably early 2023 and is kind of carried on through September. We're now in the kind of community review, moving into the administrative review process here, where the formal submission is being prepared. We've provided the draft checklist, which happy to take questions on if there are any. And then moving on to the public meetings. So in this case, because there are no modifications being requested, this application can be processed under this administrative review. So in a moment, we'll kind of show you what those next steps will be, which will include an approval letter prepared by the zoning administrator. So again, just to capture the difference between this kind of administrative, more by right process versus the use permit process. Under the commercial form-based code criteria, these are the elements that would trip a project into a use permit. In this case, we're looking at the neighborhood's form-based code, and typically it's going to be those sites that are either within conservation areas or maybe requesting some kind of modification. So again, none of these are triggered, and that's why we feel that this can move forward administratively. So again, just a quick snapshot of our review schedule starting in early 2023. We're now here at the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group meeting, and we anticipate working with the zoning administrator on that approval letter this month and next, and hoping to issue that in December of 2023. This also captures some of the community meetings that have been held, and would open the floor to the applicant to speak to any of the specifics of any of these meetings, if you have anything else to add. So with that, I'll turn it back over to our chair for discussion.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate seeing these proposals, and thank you to staff and the applicant for the incredible amount of work and thought and thoughtfulness that's gone into them. Can I ask to go back to slide 7 of the staff presentation? Before I open the floor, I just want to make sure that there's no confusion on one particular point. Right. For the members of the AWG, I want to make sure everyone is on the same page with respect to this level of review. This is the term by right has been used. It's not. It is and it isn't by right, right? What it is an administrative process review under the form-based code, right? So it's more than just by right per the zoning district, but it's less than the usual amount of process that a public process that is involved in a use permit. That it is involved under the projects that have gone forward in the form-based code in the past. Is there anyone? Just want to make sure we all have an opportunity to ask any questions about that before we move forward. It looks like there are no questions on that, which is great. So then I don't have any questions beyond that. So I want to open the floor for conversation, feedback, questions from the rest of the AWG. Linda, we'll go to you.
Thank you. Before I forget, I just wanted to compliment you all for including so many 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom apartments. That's really, really impressive. I've got 5 questions, different topic areas, pretty straightforward. My first question is on page 4. It's the picture that shows the current buildings running north and south. There's a pretty noticeable shadow on the single family lot that's just to the north of the AHC property. And I'm wondering, and this is a picture that was taken when there was full tree canopy. It's not during the winter when the sun is lower in the sky and you have more shadows going north. I'm wondering what the height of the current northernmost building is vis-a-vis the height of the proposed building AB at that northern end next to the single family lot.
Yeah, Phoebe, could you pull up that slide that she's mentioning, and then we can go over the.
Yeah, it's page 4, heights. But I think it's slide like 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the early ones.
I think you're talking about the aerial contact slide where you could see the Google Maps view of the buildings. Yeah. And you're talking about the shadow.
Yeah, right there, the shadow right there. Yes, from the building to the single family lot. And this is when the canopy is fully, everything's leafed out. So this was not a picture taken during winter. So I'm curious what the height of the current building is that's casting that shadow vis-a-vis the height of the proposed end of the new building and how it's going to affect the single family lot.
I'm looking now for the height of the existing building in Travis, or Phoebe, let me know if you have that on hand. I think it should be in our plans, but Phoebe, could you speak to the height of the proposed building there? The townhouse frontage, 3 stories.
Lauren, the existing building is 3 stories tall.
I'm sorry, that didn't quite come through.
I said the existing building is 3 stories tall.
Right. Do we have the height of it?
Yeah, the actual height.
It's 25 feet tall from grade.
From grade? Okay.
Okay.
I would mention that the aerial photograph north is to the right.
Right.
And then the proposed, if you can hear me, the proposed development is 3 stories plus a roof.
With the attic story, yeah.
And what is it? What is its height?
35 average. Because each story I think is 10 feet.
Okay.
I'd have to verify that, but I think that's my recollection.
The existing building is located about 11.3 feet from the northern property line where the shadow is. the new building will be set back 40.5 feet. So it'll be set back 30 feet further from the single family home, but it'll only be taller.
Yes, that's great. That really helps provide context in terms of what the actual impact will be. Thank you. My second question is, can you talk just for a minute about the fencing that you're using on the south and west sides of the property bordering Army Navy? What kind of fence, height, etc.? I've forgotten what the fence arrangement is for the current building that's just been completed.
Sure, I'll recognize Phoebe and Chuck to speak about the materials there around the landscaping facing the country club.
Hi guys, I'm Chuck McNamara with Campion Ruby Landscape Architects. The fencing around the building is, I believe, 6 foot height. It'll have some transparency to it. It's not chain link fence that's specifically called out as not allowed under the FBC guidelines. So it'll most likely be of some, black metal construction.
So 6 feet all the way around.
Right.
Okay.
But open, not solid.
Right. Okay. You definitely want to take advantage of the view. There's no question about that. Next question is the visitor bike parking only being on the street. Is it possible to do visitor bike parking in the garages?
Yes, I think that's an access. AHC can work that out with their access that we are providing more than is required in those bike rooms. So I think that's likely that they could do that. I guess I'll also just note that the requirement for the on-street bike parking is lower than what we're providing because we wanted to provide more guest bike parking than is required.
Yes, and I definitely appreciate that. I'm just curious, as a courtesy to the folks visiting, could it possibly be inside out of the weather, if that's possible? But definitely appreciate the fact that you've gone well above the amount that's required.
Josh, do you want to
I would
speak
say
to?
I bike in DC, and when I visit my friend's apartment and they have bike parking, they fob me in. So I would expect if I was visiting a friend at Terraces West that they would do the same thing if it was raining. I don't think there's like a policy issue or dispute we would have on that side.
Or a space issue in the garage. You don't foresee a problem.
Also,
yeah, we haven't been over capacity at East, which also provides bike parking. So
that's where I was going, which is we have a lot in East and all three developments work together. So
yeah,
there's plenty of parking.
Yeah, we haven't been oversubscribed for East, so I don't think with our sort of even enhanced numbers at West that we would have a problem with that.
Great, thank you. The next topic, the usable living space in the attic units. Can you identify, for example, a regular one bedroom, what the square footage of a regular one bedroom is, and then what would be the square footage for a one bedroom that's in the attic area? I'm asking because I'm curious if there are rules about actual usable living space.
Right.
And all of us who are in Cape Cods, you have the half story up, and unless you put dormers in, you definitely lose usable living space. So I'm just curious how the sizes of, for example, a one bedroom, two bedroom, any of them, how they compare to their compatriots that don't have the dormers.
Right. Well, while Phoebe's looking that up, I'll know we did take a hard look at providing additional living space in the dormers on the townhouse small apartment frontage to provide more space for residents, and that all of the residential space in that attic story in those dormers is an extension of the below grade space as required by the form-based code. And so it is all one unit there extending from the third floor to the attic story. And then Phoebe, do you want to speak to the unit sizes?
I can speak to the units. Actually, if I lived in this building, I would want to be in the attic. This is the footprint of a typical 2-bedroom, which is actually a generous space. And this is the footprint of a 2-bedroom unit in the attic space. And each of these dormers, we've paid particular attention to the scale of them, but they're not your average dormer. They are large enough. And you can see here that we have triple windows. They're large enough to fit a bedroom in this space that's like 11 feet wide. So it's a long bedroom. Yeah.
Okay.
So these dormers are large. They're going to be light filled. They're going to get the best views. And then we're going to be tucking bathrooms and utility, like, stuff that you don't need views for in the back of the unit. And they're actually going to be larger. So rest assured, they're going to be nice units.
So those are actually more desirable.
Yes.
Excellent.
Right.
Excellent. Okay. Just out of curiosity, are there, because this is a affordable housing, are there state and or federal requirements about a 1-bedroom has to be at least this big, 2-bedroom has to be at least this big, 3-bedroom? Are there rules, just out of curiosity, when you all are building affordable housing?
Josh, do you want to speak to that? I know there are HUD standard requirements for items, that you have to include, space you have to provide in a unit, living space, living room, bedroom, etc.
Yeah,
But I don't think there's a unit restriction or size restrictions.
I was going to see if Tom, our construction manager, wanted to chime in. I think the short answer is no, but
yeah.
Okay.
Well, there are a few. Hi, Tom Walling, work at the construction pre-development department at AHC. Virginia, the Virginia code has minimum room size requirements for bedrooms. The smallest bedroom you can have is 70 square feet with at least a 110-foot dimension clear. And for these, which are for 2 people, your minimum size is 120 with a minimum 10-foot dimension. So we obviously meet all those requirements. A 10 by 12, 11 by 13 bedrooms are pretty typical for all of our units on this.
Okay. Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Linda, you had one more?
One more. And now I'm not quite sure why I made this note yesterday. I wanted to talk about the connector section.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you calling it the connector section? I'm just curious, because you've got all kinds of 3 bedrooms and then studios plus 2 bedrooms on the attic level. And you've certainly explained the benefits now of how you've designed the dormers. So is there anything that we should know about the connector section?
Yeah. And that section you're seeing is really a function of how we've had to navigate the form-based code. And Phoebe, if you could bring up like one of the site plans, I think that kind of illustrates that point. We extended the urban residential blue frontage north 50 feet as we're allowed to. And then we were left with, more space than you could fit, than would be efficient for a residential building. So we kind of left with this additional area that we've set back from the RBL. We just call it a connector piece because it's linking that building AB to the building CD there to your right. So it's really a function of how we're navigating in the form-based code and being able to have occupiable building space there where we would not be able to if it did face the RBL, because the building frontage would be too long.
Okay.
Longer than required.
Okay. That's all the questions I've got. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
As always, we appreciate your attention to detail. Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you all. I'm going to go to Michelle and then Catherine. I want to make sure everyone makes note of the fact that we're at quarter of, and we still have at least one brief update from staff. So be advised. That's all.
Thanks for the advisement. I think mine are quickish. One is not really related specifically to the form-based code permit, but like I was just curious about like what the in short form, I guess, like what happens to the residents that are here now, and like how, and that's a little bit related to my next question, which is, and I'll just ask them both now, which is, you said the residents were really interested in a playground, and you sort of like have a spot where it is, but I was just wondering if there's more detail specifically on the playground? Like, is it another tot lot that's like what there is there now? And that nature area, is that the nature play area, is that blocked off? Like, does that just become a dog relief area, or is that specifically like a kid area, or it's just like open space that's not going to be end up for kids? So those are my two questions. It's just the playground seems so important, but I didn't really see much information about it other than there's something there apparently.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll recognize Josh first to speak about resident relocation. I believe the intent is to temporarily relocate folks who are living here now back into the building once it's completed. And you just went through this on AVT East, right?
Yep. So we just are wrapping up this month with our last relocations back. So everyone who lives on this side of the street now are part of a HUD voucher program called HAP. They all have HAP contracts. So there is like a rigorous and sort of defined comprehensive resident relocation plan. For everyone that we relocated during the East redevelopment, we were able to house them sort of within the rest of our Arlington portfolio, and our resident services folks work with people if they have kids to make sure they can stay, in the same schools, and kind of all the care and attention that a quality relocation plan would have. So that goes through HUD specifically, and the HUD kind of guidance when you do something with their contracts is that everyone who wants to return to that site, like they would have to move jurisdictions or sort of, for whatever reason, not want that spot anymore to not return to site. So basically, we will have new tenants mixed with what we assume will be sort of 100% of the folks that we relocate for a couple of years to get this one done. And we're just wrapping that up with our HUD folks successfully at East now.
Thanks, Josh. And then Michelle, on your second question about the play area and the function of the open space in the back and what that'll be used for, Chuck, do you want to chime in on play space, the intent of that natural winding path on the back there? I think it's more of an informal area, right?
Sure thing. Yeah, so the area that's sort of a darker gray, that'll be more of a traditional play space. I believe, and I believe there was maybe some community outreach, or was going to be, as far as preferences, and I think they had elected to go for traditional sort of climbing slides type of situation. I'm not sure exactly what the details of that will be, but the kind of more curvilinear place where the cursor is currently. So it's flanking an ADA ramp, so it's going to have a little bit of like slope and undulation of terrain. It's not currently gated or like restricted. I guess that could be a signage thing that says, no dogs please, or something, if that were a concern. Yeah, but it's mostly just sort of like a lawn and natural outdoor space for sort of kids to be kids, without it having to be programmed area.
Thanks, Chuck. And then I'll note too, in the area on the bottom right there, winding up towards EF, that is within, you can see our resource protection area line there. So the intent there is to create a more natural winding path and have less program space so that we're not encroaching into the RPA.
Thanks. I just want to say, like, it seems really fuzzy, your idea of what the playground is going to be. And so I just want to be very clear, like that, you listed that as like one of the top 3 things of the concerns for the community.
Sure.
And so I just want to make sure, that you're taking that seriously.
It'll be no less substantial than what exists on the site today. It's a pretty kind of typical like early 2000s playset. We have not finished design development, which is our next phase after we get through zoning, which is when the landscaping plan and those particulars are set. So yeah, we don't have a unit or fixture list, but we heard from residents that the space for it was a priority, and making sure that it didn't get eliminated when the building on that EF parcel got larger. So we have space for it, and we'll continue to meet with them to make sure we get the right fixtures picked.
Right, yeah. The what goes in that space won't be determined by this administrative approval of this application. They'll still have opportunities to refine that design, as Josh mentioned, through the landscape plan process.
Thanks. I guess my last comment would,
Yes.
this is it, Dan, I promise. It's just that,
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
that little nature play area that's actually kind of a lawn, but maybe also a dog area, like, you know, to the degree that staff is considering that like active open space. I don't, it seems a little wishy-washy to me, but that's my last comment.
If anyone wants to give feedback or respond to that, otherwise, I think it can be taken under advisement. Is that right, Michelle?
Yeah, thanks.
Catherine.
Thank you. Just a very quick question, and actually that ground level plan is just as good as any diagram for this question. I don't know if you want to zoom in a little bit, but I just was curious about the elevator situation. It looks as though, if I'm reading the plans correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, for building ABCD, am I correct in understanding that there are 2 elevators in that building? Is that accurate? I'm seeing some shaking heads. Okay, great. And are they configured in such a way that if one of them were to break, there's a bit of redundancy there with the other one still being able to function? Is that true?
Yes, and it's also AHC's desire to have 2 elevators in the larger building based on their experience. You know, sometimes the elevator is needed for move-in, and you don't want to keep people from being able to use it. So when you have a building of a certain size, that's their policy. And both elevators will be large enough for either situation because they're large enough for stretchers.
And that brings me then to my question, which is for the other building. It looks as though there's only the one elevator. I recognize it's a smaller building, and I'm sure you've squeezed every last thing in that you possibly can. But I'm just wondering, was there any thought given to seeing if it was possible to have 2 lifts in that building as well, mindful of the utility of having redundancy? Particularly, you referenced a population of people who are trying to age in place, and recognizing that can be really challenging particularly for older residents and residents with disabilities who, if a lift goes down, you know, that can really trap people. And wondering if particularly in that building with only the one lift, is there any thought to non-powered evacuation chairs or things that could be utilized if somebody needed to exit that building who would ordinarily be reliant upon a lift, an elevator, and how would you affect that if they needed to get out and that one lift were incapacitated in some way? So I just wanted to flag that. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think given the size of this building, one elevator is appropriate for this amount of units. But Phoebe or Tom, you could speak to the additional mechanical and other space it would take to put another elevator here, and whether or not that's would be efficient use of that residential space. And then Josh, I don't know if you want to also be able to speak to resident services and what you all would do in an emergency if the elevator went down. I think that's something we can plan for.
I can add something for that. Similar to what we did on ABT East, the elevator is hooked up to emergency power. So that's not a situation that's going to happen. So we don't have to worry about that one. It is a tight site and a tight building, and it is kind of modest in size. 2 elevators seems like more than would be reasonable, honestly. And then we also have the 2 egress stairs, which are large enough to be accessible means of egress. So they're fully code compliant with all the life safety concerns that we address when we comply with those. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but
This is Kathy. Yeah, no, I appreciate it's a tight spot, and I fully expected that this would be code compliant, but I was so pleased to see the dual elevators in the one building. And as you are, dealing with an aging in-place population, just wanted to flag if it's not feasible to have redundancy in terms of, mechanical elevators in the one building. Just a bit of thoughtfulness in terms of emergency evacuation or something where there might be other reasons other than power why utilization of a lift might be inappropriate, and just making sure that there's a way for people to safely exit. I work in the disability space and have been in buildings where, for a variety of reasons, the lifts are not functioning, and often with power wheelchair users and people, and it's not great to have to rely upon the fire service to come and evacuate people. So just as you guys have been obviously forward thinking about these things, just wanted to flag it. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
I'm going to go to Mark and then Linda briefly, and then I'd like to move on to our last item for the evening.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I'll be real quick. So parking. I understand you satisfied the parking requirements, and you have parking in each of the two buildings. Is the parking available in each building proportional to either the number of bedrooms or the number of units? I know you have 65 total spaces, but are they divvied up? So if I'm in EF, I'll be able to park in EF and not have to park in A, B, C, D because there's no parking available because there's fewer parking spaces relative to the number of units or bedrooms.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think, let me see. Phoebe, what is our breakdown of parking per building? I think there's 46 parking spaces in ABCD garage and 19 in the EF garage. And I believe both residents of either building would be able to park in either garage. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we don't foresee an issue with availability of parking for residents. They'll be able to go to either garage, and the garage underneath ABCD is larger than the one under EF.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering proportionality. And I guess then my other question is, if I have to park in the other building, I have to go outside to get to my building, correct?
You would have to, yeah, because there's that public road 14th Street South that bisects the property.
Yeah.
Which we're required to provide.
Right.
we did have that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think back to Linda for our last question or comment on the matter.
What are your sidewalk widths?
Travis, you want to take that?
We're providing 6-foot sidewalk along all frontages.
Excellent. Thank you. That's it.
Easy one.
All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you all to the applicant and especially and also and to staff for the excellent presentations and responses to questions. I think we are ready. Oh, okay, there it is. We're ready for the agenda forecast. Right. And
thanks, everyone.
Yeah, have a great evening. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. All right, we'll make this very quick. This is just a preview of some of our upcoming projects, and just letting you guys know that we do have kind of a full agenda likely for the next 2 months. So next month in November, you're going to see a green building requirements amendment that we're proposing for both the commercial and neighborhoods codes. And then we also have another use permit for a different section in Barcroft, very similar to the last use permit that we saw, I think back in July. But this one does not include any additions. So more to come next month. We do have 2 other development projects right now that are in process. The Frame Shop, which had its second preliminary submission in April of 2023. They're continuing to work through some revisions to their plans in response to some comments from our Department of Environmental Services. And then the second project here had its first preliminary submission in June of 2023, and very similarly, just working through some of the initial staff comments that were provided. So we may start seeing those come forward as early as December, but then into early next year. And that is all. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, I think that wraps us up for the evening. Thank you to those who stayed. Well, not too late, but it is over. My apologies for that, and thank you for your indulgence. I don't recall whether or not there's a wrap-up speech that I'm supposed to give, but if there is, I'm just gonna say I'm not going to give it. And so we will be reconvening again next month. That's right, on November.
Yep, November 15th.
November 15th. And so look forward to seeing everyone then. Have a good night.
Great, thank you.
We're adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.